Hello, everyone. Welcome to MD Media Show. This is a special show on a documentary that is premiering right now at tigrayatwar.org. And I'm joined by three guests who were behind this documentary. And the documentary title is Tigray at War, Cultural Heritage Under Siege. I'm pleased to introduce Michael Gervers, Hagos Abraha, and David Tonks, who joined me from different places. And we apologize that we started late by 35 minutes because we have had technical issues with our guests. First, maybe the way of introducing yourselves. David, if you introduce to our viewers what you do and how we are connected to this important documentary that is premiering today.
Hello, everyone. I'm the video filmmaker on this project. I was involved with Michael Gervers for a number of years, doing evidence filming and documentaries on the rock churches and various cultural icons throughout Tigray, specifically. And so he approached me when this project started, and I was very pleased to be involved. There's a lot more to be done. This is an introductory program, but I'm pleased to be here today and to have presented this to you.
Great, thank you, David. Welcome. Hagos, this is not the first time you came to the media, but other way of again introducing yourself to whoever is seeing you for the first time. Hagos.
Okay, thank you very much, Getachew and UMD Media once again. I'm now in Hamburg University and working my postdoctoral research. But the way I connected with this documentary film is I was documenting the cultural heritage destruction in Tigray from here. And then because of that, I became part of this Friends of Tigray, or this initiative of documentary film. And then, of course, I knew Michael, Professor Michael, long ago, and also there are other people like Joanny and Dr. Andrea and other colleagues working on the documentary film. So I'm happy to join and working with them in the last couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you, Hagos. Michael?
Thank you, Getachew. Thank you very much for having me on UMD. This is a fantastic opportunity to be able to share some of our research and the work that we've been doing. I'm speaking to you from the University of Toronto in Canada. I have been working on the ground in Ethiopia for the last 40 years, and I consider myself to be quite familiar with the country. I teach the history of Ethiopia at the University of Toronto, both on the undergraduate and graduate levels. And in recent years, one of our triumphs here is that we've introduced the teaching of Ge'ez, again at undergraduate and graduate levels, on a regular basis. Through the support of the Ethiopian community in Toronto, we raised $500,000 in order to have a continuing program of old Ethiopic language studies. So that's just a little bit of background of really why I'm here. And again, happy to share our thoughts with the audience today.
Great, thank you, Michael. Actually, I remember during in the middle of the war, I tried to reach out to you. If you can come over and say something about cultural heritage and so on, but because of the information blackout, you and everyone else was, at loss in terms of what we could say, what we knew, and so on. So I think this is a great way of maybe telling what we knew and what we didn't know at that time. So maybe to start off, David, you can give us a highlight of what the documentary is. I know our viewers can watch this documentary on the original website, the host tigrayatwar.org, that is running at the ticker. We'll be also showing it after this show on UMD Media's channel. And those who are in Horn of Africa, you will also watch the documentary on satellite via Horn Broadcasting Services, where UMD Media is on. So what is the, I mean, in terms of the process of doing this documentary and the content and so on, if you can give us a highlight, David, that would be great. You are muted, I guess.
Sorry about that. You'd think I'd know. Yes, absolutely. Basically, when we approached this project, we thought that we had initial issues as far as getting any kind of footage out of the country. It was incredibly difficult. We did manage over months and months to collect a lot of footage from Tigray television and some other sources that came to us in bits and pieces. But the backbone of the program, and indeed of the other material that we have that I want to utilize, are the interviews from the experts, that two of which are here today, and a number of other ones online as well as in a studio environment. They actually provided the material that really tells this story. And from that, we utilized as much as possible people on the ground. So people that were literally there speaking to us or speaking to their audience about the horrific situation that was going on. And that kind of talks, that gives you more of an idea from the people that are actually experiencing it. We had material from a number of sites, a number of churches all over across the province, and also some I guess analysis based on what's happening from other informative sources. So we put all of this together, and what you see that the difficulty was to keep it to 10 minutes. We had so much material in the sense of analysis, and we had to support that visually. So that was our challenge, to have enough material visually to do that. So this is what we have, and there is more material to go that we want to utilize. So that was our main objective. We spent 2 days filming these people at a church in Toronto, actually, Canada, and getting an insight from them. So that was a terrific opportunity. And one of the quotes that on this was actually from Dr. Gervers, the quote about 16 months more damage than in 500 years. That comes directly from his interview. So that speaks to the severity of this situation.
Yeah, thanks, David. When I watched the preview or preparing for this show, that's one thing that captured my ears and my eyes in terms of the intensity of what happened in that relatively short 60 months compared to 500 years. We'll come back to that. Maybe for those of us who are not in the subject matter, into the subject matter in terms of cultural heritage under siege or cultural genocide, maybe that's where we should start. Michael, what is the
Sure.
how should we understand cultural genocide, and where did it happen before, and what are the indicators for that?
Okay, very briefly, cultural genocide is the systematic destruction of traditions, values, language, and other elements that make one group of people distinct from another. Now, I think in order to understand what we've been dealing with in Ethiopia over the last 2.5 years is lodged in history. It's not the first time that this kind of cultural genocide has happened in Ethiopia. I would say the last time was in the 16th century, which is the reference we've made to 500 years, when a Somali by the name of Ahmed Grany, at least we think that he was a Somali, campaigned against Ethiopia from 1529 until 1543, annually attacking the country and not only killing, but also making a point of destroying its cultural monuments, particularly in this case, its Christian monuments. So if you go to Ethiopia today and you find a blackened ceiling somewhere, anywhere, you'll be told that this goes back to the time of Ahmed Grany. Well, that's not necessarily true, but at the same time, there are major monuments, such as the original Cathedral of Aksum, which was built sometime between the 4th and the 6th century. I think our viewers need to recognize that Christianity came to Ethiopia in the 4th century, and that Ethiopia was the second Christian kingdom ever to have been. The first was Armenia, the second was Ethiopia in about 340 AD, and the third was Constantine, the first Roman emperor to adopt Christianity. So it goes a long way back. Now, it seems that with the change of regime in Ethiopia, we are confronted with this kind of activity. There's a series of manuscripts known as the Garima Gospels. There are 3 of them, which are housed in, or at least we don't know their fate, but until November 2020, they were housed in the monastery of Abba Garima near Adwa in Tigray. They have been attributed, or at least 2 of them out of 3 have been attributed to the 6th century. And as such, are presumably the oldest translations of the Christian Bible in their entirety. When I say translations, they were translated from the Greek. There's another manuscript, also a Bible manuscript, a gospel manuscript, which is thought to be later than the 6th century, but it's not really been placed in time. Okay. Now, Ethiopia is filled with hundreds of thousands of ecclesiastical manuscripts, hundreds of thousands of them, spread across not just Tigray, but across Ethiopia as a whole. Now, very few, in fact, with the exception of the Garima Gospels, there are no known manuscripts dating from before the 12th century. So you have 600 years when we presume Christianity was extant and no evidence. There were many churches under the Aksumites, and we only know them from archaeological excavations. So what happened? The last major dynastic change in Ethiopia happened in 1270, which leads us to the origins of the Solomonic Empire, or the Solomonic dynasty. At that time, a king by the name of Yekuno Amlak killed the last Zagwe ruler. The Zagwe are those who were responsible for the construction of Lalibela. The more we look into the history of the Zagwe, the more we see that they themselves extended Ethiopia of the day from what is now Eritrea and Tigray southwards. After the takeover of the Solomonics after their takeover of the Zagwe, we begin to see evidence of Christianity moving southward. We have no evidence, we have no real evidence that either Yakuno Amlak or Ethiopia's best known saint, Tekle Hymenot, we have no evidence of their religious background. We do not know that Yakuno Amlak, whether he was Christian when he took over from the Zagwe, for example. Whatever the case, we might look at this Solomonic takeover as being a time when the Christian culture of the Aksumite and Zagwe worlds was destroyed. We don't have proof, but now this possibility is in the air. So then, for the next 300 years, the Solomonic dynasty reigned. It did not have a permanent capital, and it was therefore itinerant. It was itinerant in terms of the king led his company around the country from one place to the next. And this is exactly the situation that occurred when we reach the 16th century with Ahmed Gran. Ahmed Gran was trying to locate the king and destroy him, and was not able to do so, but largely because the king was on the move and able to get away from the massacres which were being carried out by Gran and his armies. Now, time is passing. That was a difficult century, the 16th century, and we get to the 17th century, where for the first time, the Solomonic dynasty was able to found a capital, a permanent capital, which was in Gondar, a city which is well known in Ethiopia today. Under the rule of the Solomonics, ever since 1270 up until the present day, there has been tension, if not outright war, between the north and the south in Ethiopia. So that's just another thought to keep in mind. I would also like to our viewers to recognize that Ethiopia of today is a very, very different place from Ethiopia of the 12th century, the 13th century. Ethiopia today became the shape that it holds only in the late 19th century, with Menelik increasing by becoming a colonizer. King Menelik added to the south and the west and the east of Ethiopia as no other king had done before him, adding to the many different cultural groups within Ethiopia. So just that's a little bit of background of what we're faced with when we're looking at the ethnic tensions which are constant in Ethiopia today. A lot of them are new, and when I say new, 140 years old at the most, 130 years. So that is an addition to this ongoing tension that has gone on between the people of Eritrea and Tigray and the Solomonic dynasty for the last 800 years, not just 500. So perhaps I should stop there. I've tried to sort of summarize things in a setting to give us more to talk about.
Thank you, Michael. So Hagos, you can build on that in terms of cultural genocides happening in the past elsewhere, and what we knew in terms of the cultural heritage in Tigray or before the war. because that I think would give our viewers a setting where this documentary comes in and what happened since November 2020.
Okay, thank you very much. Regarding the definition of the cultural genocide, it's always argumentative since 1948, when there was a genocidal convention in Paris after the World War by the United Nations, because it was perceived as more of biological and physical, while there are still cultural and other destructions. And then there were some terms like ethnocide, or like there are terms like ethnic cleansing, and whatever cultural genocide. When there is a genocide, there is always cultural genocide, I believe. Because why a certain group of people are targeted? It's because of their identity, because of their culture, their material culture, their belief system. It's not like about their personal existence or human personal existence per se. It's all about their psychosocial thinking and the way they build history and so on. So cultural genocide is like, as Professor Michael said, it's targeting, it's an attempt or a practical destruction of culture, system beliefs, psychology, whatever. So these all things have happened in Tigray, and historically speaking, there were lots of times that there was heritage or cultural heritage destruction in Tigray, be it genocidal, cultural genocide or not. But one thing that we know about kind of targeting as an ethnic group or religious group is the 16th century Ahmed Grind campaign. There were also lots of mass killings, like by the Ra'ak about the Stephanites. And also there were lots of destruction by Wube. And when there is a war in Ethiopia, of course, we cannot say it's genocidal, but there was lots of heritage destruction, including the Aksum church was built almost 3 or 4 times when we see the Chronicle of Aksum. So we have lots of experiences on this, even globally. When there is war, there is a threat for cultural heritage materials. The first document we have about this is the 5th century BC in China, the art of war, that there is a certain code of conduct about military things on the cultural properties. Then also in the 14th century by English or England during the invasion of Scotland, and the Hague Convention, and also the Geneva Convention, and also since today up to 2021, that there are like new regulations and conventions for the destruction of cultural heritage properties. But historically speaking, we cannot claim that all of them are genocidal or ethnic cleansing, but at least we have experienced about this Granny Ahmed cultural, like without any discrimination, any kind of cultural material. Of course, it was more of religious than ethnic, but I believe that nothing has happened as worse as what would happen in the last 2 years in Tigray.
Okay, David, when you introduced, thank you, Hagos. When you introduced yourself on the beginning, you mentioned about how you were working with Professor Gervers in terms of before the war in his research and documenting and so on in Tigray. So is there anything that stood out to you at that time, among other things, that maybe it keeps you thinking during the war it might have been destroyed, looted, and so on? If you can share, if you can think of something. The reason is I just want to pose all of you to share with our viewers. The Garima Gospels are one thing, but there are a number of maybe heritage with different types. David?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. We visited probably close to 30 different sites within 5 weeks on that trip alone. And basically, I was struck with the complexity and the amount of detail that was literally carved out of these rock churches. We were visiting specifically rock churches. Some of them were built partly into the rock, but the bottom line was the amount of cultural heritage that was there, the antiquity of it, and also the people that were responsible for doing it. I remember specifically doing a number of interviews with the actual craftsmen that created these sites, and humble people, very, very grounded in the belief of what they were doing, using the most rudimentary tools. It was fascinating, actually, to see how creative you can get with a sledgehammer and a piece of re-rod. But it was just unbelievable work. And one of my fears going through this and seeing kind of what's been going on is, where are those people? What's the story with those people now? I'm wondering, are they alive? Are they still doing, or will they be able to still do what they do? So this is and if not, this is even more of a crime, because future generations of cultural heritage, future examples of cultural heritage, will be under siege, in a sense, for sure. That was one thing that I was thinking of quite a bit. Yeah.
Great. Michael, in terms of your subject matter research, you have a big interest in this, I gather. So how were you reading and hearing during that, since November 2020, in terms of the information blackout, all that? So what was the way you were communicating, if any, learning? Because I heard some of these were being, sold in foreign markets, even in Addis, and so on. So do we know anything about what was going on during that period?
We certainly do, but Prime Minister Abiy did an excellent job of keeping the media out of the Tigray region, so that there was nothing coming through officially. But as Dr. Abraha has said, that it was possible through satellite cell phones to hear from people here and there, but there was no communication in Tigray between places. So unless you were in contact with someone who was personally involved in something that had some disaster that had just happened, it was extremely difficult to put it together into a single picture. That is now coming out slowly but surely. The church indicated already in the spring of 2021 that hundreds of priests had been killed, hundreds of them. So what has that done to the priesthood 2 years later? What I would like to do, and I think a number of our colleagues, would be ourselves to go to Tigray and begin to document all the damage that has been done. At the moment, the situation, the countryside is insecure, and I'm not sure that I and my colleagues want to risk our own lives to move even from Addis Ababa up to Tigray, except maybe by airplane, which is by no means impossible. But then when you get to Tigray, how do you get around? There's no fuel. There is the transportation will be extremely difficult. So generally speaking, it's the problem that everybody is faced with who is trying to defend the people of Tigray is communication.
Yeah, that's a critical element. In fact, one of the maybe Hagos and Michael, you can speak to this. Now, as a media, we were receiving a list of monasteries, churches, and mosques that were being destroyed, looted, and servants, killed during the war. And we knew that this was also shared to the church in Addis, among other organizations. Mahabar Kadusan, this is, I don't know if Michael, this is a youth and the educated part of the society within the church. And that was usually more vocal and immediately acting on reports of this kind, but we chose, not to act, even not to even accept the report and so on. So the information blackout is one thing, but one of the problems we saw is even whatever information was being received by Addis, it was being rejected. I don't know if you have been following this closely, Hagos, in terms of this information flow, the ban, the blackout. At the same time, whenever there is something coming out, there was a lot of denial.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, this question triggers me a lot of things here and there, because I have been indulged in a very traumatizing situation of documenting this cultural heritage destruction. And then I had a connection with some of the individuals with satellite telephone, and also there were some Tigrayans who survived the genocide into different parts of the country or other neighboring countries. So based on that, we have been documenting the number of churches, archaeological sites, museums, palaces, statues, and so on. So there are a lot, and one of the problems that we didn't know the exact amount of destruction was not only because of the blockade, but also there was no interest by the church, as you said, to condemn what was going on. Like even the members of the Holy Synod were like against the patriarch while he was condemning what was happening in Tigray. So not only that, even some of them were actors, like hundreds of priests were arrested in Addis Ababa. Some of the deacons were taken or snatched from the church of Bole Medhani Alem while they were attending a mass or serving a mass, and then taken into prison, concentration camps. So it's like a full-fledged ethnic targeting. So the value, the people, and like what Professor Michael said, at the beginning of 2021, like we have reports of 326 members of clergies executed in Tigray, which was reported by the Tigray Orthodox Church Diocese, which was like 3 months into the war. And we have documents of hundreds of monasteries and churches damaged, like archaeological sites like in Aksum and Wu'ro and some other areas, and also persecution of monks here and there, like in Waldibba and Gu'tolo. So it's a big amount of loss, even that has suffocated while Tigray was under blockade. So this shows how the amount is beyond our imagination. Then when there is a little bit resumption of telecommunication and so on, we are still coming across many other cultural heritage damages or destructions here and there, for which we didn't have information during the blockade. And not only that, not only the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, but also the international community, mainly the international responsible bodies like UNESCO, ECOM, and other related organizations were not giving any attention. I had an experience, personal experience of frustration while I have presented about the cultural heritage destruction in front of the board of UNESCO, and their recommendation was that I had to collaborate with the RSCH in Addis Ababa to solve the problem about the cultural heritage destruction in Tigray, for which these RSCH members didn't condemn at all. So I personally have tried to present some of the cultural heritage destruction in the European Parliament, the UNESCO, in the German, some big institutions like and the foreign minister knows, and some other areas around Europe. But the impression I got is so much less impression and interest to make it an agenda. And on the other side, luckily enough, those bodies are curious and cognizant about what's going on in Ukraine, which is good. But honestly, I was expecting at least the same attention, regardless of the political sensitivity around the West. But as a cultural heritage, that Tigray cultural heritage materials are global heritage materials, and less attention is given by the globe, not only by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. So this is what I have observed during the war. I was in Tigray actually 2 months into the war. Then I have observed many things like mass killings, and also, of course, I didn't see any cultural destruction because there was no communication. And then even I didn't expect that they would target cultural heritage materials and civilians. It was only after I came here and then I had a connection with some of the important people with satellite telecoms that I personally have learned there is a serious target of civilians and their values. So this is even not only destruction, but also looting precious manuscripts and other ecclesiastical materials that were like popping up in many e-commerce or online shopping like eBay, and also even in the ground, even in Addis Ababa and Sudan, Kenya. So this is based on our preliminary assessment and observation, but which needs a serious and scientific research and investigation. That's all what I can say for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Agos. Maybe for both David and Michael, there are, when I watched this, it's a relatively short documentary, but it captured a lot in terms of what people were saying and so on. So when people discuss genocide, they talk about intent. Actually, those who deny as well, they talk about, where is the intent or evidence for intent and so on. So one thing that stood out for me was the military officer, where he said, if people are hiding, or if you have to destroy even churches and so on, just go for them and so on. So what was the process for you in selecting, let's say, David, the materials? I mean, the original interviews are there, but in terms of what was out there for you to include, that would indicate this cultural heritage under siege. David.
Well, thank you. Basically, my original guideline was an interview that we did with Dr. Adam Jones, who is a genocide author. And he was very specific, although this portion, I did not put this portion, there he is right now on the screen. I did not put this portion on the program, but he basically said, under international law, religious groups are among the 4 protected groups of the Genocide Convention. And so destroying religious groups and the associated physical infrastructure in which they operate is part of a systematic attack against a protected group. So basically, you know, I was looking for people or comments that supported that, in the sense that, okay, there is a conflict, but the conflict, you know, had broader impacts, and that speaks to the cultural heritage not only of Ethiopia and Tigray, but really of the world, because of its antiquity, of its influence across the Christian world, specifically around the world. So, you know, we were going with that sort of a content.
Yeah, Michael, on the same topic,
Maybe
but yeah,
sorry.
yeah, you can add on that. And as well, I want to know, given this heritage, cultural heritage is, yes, it's located in Tigray, but it's world heritage, if you will, right? So what was your assessment to this day, especially during that time, the international community, the international organizations, countries, and even scholars, in terms of reacting to what was happening in Tigray? Michael?
Right. For me, one of the most extraordinary things about this conflict is the desire on the part of the Ethiopian government to destroy the cultural heritage of Tigray, because the cultural heritage of Tigray is the cultural heritage of the whole of Ethiopia. Every legend that we hear in every village in Ethiopia has its origin in Tigray. So even the story of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba comes from Tigray. The monuments, the spread of Christianity, it's all Tigray based. And another thing which nobody seems to realize, that this major tourist and cultural center in Ethiopia of Lalibela is somehow claimed by what I would call the Solomonics. They had nothing to do with it. They were the ones who killed the kings who were responsible for making Lalibela. That culture is what is under the gun. Now, Solomonic Ethiopia claims it all for themselves, but they did not contribute to it. They just adopted it. So from the viewpoint of the history of the landscape, the history of Ethiopia, the cultural history of Ethiopia, the Christian history of Ethiopia comes from Tigray. So why would a government supported by the people, and even more extraordinarily by the other academic institutions in Ethiopia outside Tigray, why they would want to destroy their own culture? It just doesn't make any sense at all. And in the long run, of course, the whole of Ethiopia has suffered because of this. In the end, since Tigray has been the heartbeat of the culture of the region for 3,000 years, not just 500, not just 2,000, but 3,000 years. When we can go back 3,000 years and find written inscriptions in Tigray. What happens when all this is suddenly turned up on its head? For me, the whole thing is just incomprehensible. It doesn't make any sense at all, except that one ethnic group wants to destroy another. And that's where I'd say the trouble lies. Now, Getachew, I don't know if I've answered the question that you handed to me just now. Could you?
Yeah, so the second
turn
part,
to that?
yes, you did answer the first part. The second part is, what is your assessment of, given this is a world heritage as well, how scholars, international community. Hagos was alluding to that. So what is your assessment of the reaction or the non-reaction, if you will, from the international community? And yeah.
That's interesting. I just came back last month from a conference in Italy about Ethiopia. And the conflict, this is something which it went on for 3.5 days. The conflict was not mentioned once. The academic world is anxious. It's the elephant in the room. I think because researchers would like to go back to Ethiopia, and they are concerned that if they speak out, they won't be able to do so. I've made the decision that that's not, I mean, I don't feel the least bit concerned about that. I think in the end, what has happened will quite quickly disappear in Ethiopia. In other words, nobody's going to forget about the war, but the leaders of this extremely damaging undertaking will disappear. And at that point, we'll all be able to go back and help strengthen the region. But it is surprising to me that very few academics have been speaking out. I'd say that there are a handful of us, and we will continue to do so. And eventually, I think the rest of the world will begin to realize that something serious has been going on.
I think that goes to everything that has happened actually outside cultural heritage as well. Silencing was one of the big weapons used. Whoever is going to speak up would be silenced directly or indirectly in different ways. David, I just want to, we are going to the end of the show, but for those who want to, for example, I was mentioning how they can access it, but anything that your group, outside this documentary, people should know in terms of supporting, in terms of, collaborating on efforts that you have been doing?
Yes, thank you. You'll see the bottom of the screen, tigray.org. That is really where we could use some assistance in recognizing this. The website is inclusive of the information we're putting out and will continue to be added to with more information, historical perspective, as well as geopolitical perspective. And that's where the people can help us by, there's a number of actions, call to actions that are listed on the website. And that's really crucial at this point to get that support that Michael has alluded to, has not until now, hopefully, been there. That would be what I would say. I mean, to contact these international organizations and let them know that this is not okay, basically.
Thank you, David. Hagos, on the same topic, I know you have been following and researching, as you said, and you are all over the place in terms of conferences, webinars, media, and so on. So what's next? What should people do? Who should do what?
Okay, thank you. Like what David had said, this documentary, by the way, I would like to thank David and Johanny and all of the members of the documentary film. Before that, so the objective of this documentary film is just to voicing the cultural heritage destruction, and so that there will be an action for accountability by the responsible bodies like the UNESCO, ECOM, even ICC, because there are like cultural heritage destruction or cultural genocide is considered as the human right. It's treated under the human rights jurisdiction based on the ICC document 2021, also UNESCO 2015, and also 2021. So it's like it should be treated under human rights, and it should be given an attention by the responsible international bodies. But for this to substantiate the voice, this documentary will help to direct other individuals or members of the global community to join us, and also to restitute or repatriate some of the looted materials, and also for the way forward about the rehabilitation in the post-conflict. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question, Michael. And in relation to people are worried, the siege, actually, Mulgeta Gabrahe, what professor wrote from Magala this week, the siege is continuing, but it's being micromanaged. So there is a fear that there will be a loss of evidences, all this information that people like you want to have and to document and to research on. So what's next in terms of, or what should people in Tigray do, especially the universities that are opening slowly? What should they do, while the siege at the micro level is continuing?
What would be most important for all of us would be that question of documentation, so that if the younger generation, especially in Tigray, can get out into the countryside and document what has happened, and bring it back to their universities, and let us know at the same time what they've been able to discover, the easier it will be to try and reconstruct or redevelop what has been lost. Now, let me just mention that a few months ago, I was approached by an organization based in Switzerland, asking me to suggest places to which they could direct funding for reconstruction of cultural heritage, with the proviso that it's not in Tigray. In other words, they didn't want to touch it either. They said, let's tell us where around Lalibela we can invest money and some of our projects. Well, Lalibela wasn't damaged. So this is what we're faced with. The world is still centered around the Ethiopian government, and perhaps for the same reason that the colleagues are reluctant to speak out, governments and institutions, which normally would be prepared to repair damage, feel that they cannot mention the word Tigray. So somehow we've got to get a change moving here, that people recognize that the core of Ethiopian civilization lies in Tigray, and that its reparations should be supported.
Maybe on that note, I'm just finishing that final one, because during the siege, or the main siege and the war, the diaspora played a great role in raising awareness, campaigning, and so on. And we don't see that happening. So is there anything the diaspora should do, given that you are saying, Tigray is, a word even that actually in the media was said, it should be something that the Ethiopian government should ban. Ethiopian academician on TV was saying that during the war. So the fear of that and the continuing erasing the information, erasing the awareness is, I think, part of the problem. So anything the diaspora could do on that front?
Well, we're doing our best here in Canada, and there are other groups in Europe that have been working extremely hard. I think of our colleagues at the University of Ghent who are constantly drawing together information. Now, we can ask the diaspora, because as we all know, there's a fight going on between the supporters of the government, who I call the Solomonics, and the Tigrayans in the diaspora as well. And a lot of the trouble that has gone on around this conflict is because of the diaspora egging on, for example, the government. The Tigrayans, it's a smaller group of people, 5 million out of 110 million people whose voice is not so loud. So as far as I'm concerned, we just all have to continue doing what we can, and trying to make a bigger splash. And for the sake of what we're working on here in Canada, to draw people to the website that we're developing, so that we can add signatures to the letters that we hope to send to, or we plan and will be sent to, international organizations, asking them to pay attention. So individual action is important, and everybody can make that difference, even by adding their signature to a list.
Great, thank you so much. And our viewers, you can see here, Tigray at War, Cultural Heritage Under Siege. The documentary is available at tigrayatwar.org, and we'll be here at UMD Media. We'll be also premiering it at 11 a.m. Eastern Time today, and it will also be available on satellite under Horn Broadcasting Services to Tigray and the Horn of Africa at large. So you have a number of options on this website. It must have been already premiered, but you can check out, and then also check on our UMD Media's YouTube channel on Horn Broadcasting Services on satellite in Ethiopia and in the Horn of Africa. With that, we finished today's show, and if there is any organization, any person you want to thank, I can give you the floor. Otherwise, David Tonks, Hagos Abraha, and Michael Gervers, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank
Great.
you.
Have a
Thank
good
you very
one.
much.
You have been following us live on UMD Media's channel. We are talking about Cultural Heritage Under Siege. It's a new documentary by Friends of Tigray and Ethiopians for Peace, and a number of organizations and individuals who were working hard on developing and producing a documentary film, Tigray at War, Cultural Heritage Under Siege. So we'll be premiering that at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on this channel, and you can also watch it on satellite under HBS, and also on tigrayatwar.org. That was the show for today, and I'll see you tomorrow in yet another show with Ermias Amara, and on Monday as well. Have a good day. Good night.